Well, thank you very much for coming today, and welcome to the Nature-Based Climate Solutions Summit. My name is Graham Saul, and I'm the Executive Director of Nature Canada. Nature Canada is a national nature conservation organization with over 80 years of history of working with Canadians to discover, defend, and restore nature. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. And I'm going to say a few introductory words about how this summit came together and where we're going over the next couple days. And then I'm going to ask Claudette Commanda to come up and officially open the summit. Merci de nous joindre pour le sommet des solutions nature pour le climat. Nous attendons avec intérêt ces 2 jours de discussion importante sur une dimension émergente essentielle dans la lutte contre le changement climatique. There is simultaneous translation available for anyone who is interested. I'm going to reflect on 3 things today. First, I'd like to acknowledge and say thank you to the steering committee that organized this summit and the sponsors who supported it. Bringing this together was, in a very real way, a collaboration between many of Canada's leading nature and conservation organizations. You should be seeing some of these organizations or seeing these organizations on slides over the next couple days that we're projecting onto the wall. But they include Birds Canada, Nature Canada, Canadian Freshwater Alliance, Nature United, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, Climate Action Network, Canadian Wildlife Federation, David Suzuki Foundation, Nature Conservancy of Canada, Environmental Defence, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Wildlife Conservation Society Canada, and WWF Canada. So it was truly an amazing steering committee. There were also a number of other organizations that have been actively involved in the design and preparation of aspects of the summit that I would like to recognize, including Ducks Unlimited Canada, the Natural Resources Defence Council, West Coast Environmental Law, Equiterre, Alice Canada, and Seed Change. And as you will see from our list of summit sponsors, while most of these organizations also contributed financially to the summit, it was the time and energy that they provided and the leadership that they have shown in crafting the agenda and organizing sessions that I believe has been an amazing example of a collaboration among Canada's leading nature conservation organizations. I also want to thank our sponsors. Many of the organizations I just listed are included among the sponsors, but I especially want to thank our presenting sponsors, Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Metcalfe Foundation. The Metcalfe Foundation has been a pioneer in Canada around nature-based climate solutions, and we're glad to have Sandy and Andre here today. I also want to thank our other summit sponsors, Parks Canada, the Gosling Foundation, the Ivy Foundation, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and the Greenbelt Foundation for their financial support. The second thing I want to say is it's good that we booked a very big room. It was actually really less than 2 months ago when we opened registration, and we were focused on bringing together 100 to 150 people to have a conversation about moving from big ideas to concrete action around nature-based solutions. And in early January, I asked Emma Buchanan, who's the lead organizer for this summit, if she could check in with our beautiful venue here at the National Arts Centre and see if they could handle 200 people. Then I asked her to check in around 250, and then it was 350. And then last week, we actually cut off registration at over 400 people. So I think it's obviously an indication of how much demand there is for action around nature-based climate solutions right now, how ready we all are to dive into solutions that have thus far been somewhat inadequately explored and insufficiently supported. And we're here today to explore some of these ideas, and many of us are thinking through them for the first time. Others have far more experience on them. And I do think it's worth taking a minute to reflect on the amazing people that are in the room today and the knowledge, responsibilities, and resources that you collectively represent. There are almost 100 people here from government. We have about 65 people from the federal government alone. And thank you to Lanielle for her help corralling and encouraging all of the registration. The plurality of those folks are from Environment and Climate Change Canada, including Parks Canada, but we do also have representation from Natural Resources Canada, Infrastructure, DFO, Global Affairs Canada, Ag Canada. And there's also a really encouraging and strong delegation from provincial and territorial governments and municipal leaders. We're also honored to have more than 40 representatives from Indigenous governments and Indigenous-led organizations in the room today. And I think this is an important reminder that Indigenous-led conservation is, in many ways, the future of conservation in Canada. And there are 30 representatives from businesses and trade associations, more than 30 representatives from private foundations and grant makers, and there are almost 150 representatives from nature and environmental organizations that are joining us today. So it's an amazing group of people assembled here, and I hope you take the time to get to know each other over the next couple days. We'll eventually be posting a complete list of the participants on the Summit website to help facilitate ongoing collaboration between the folks that have been assembled here. The third thing I want to say is that I can't help but think this is the beginning of something big. Don't get me wrong, I know this isn't the beginning of the conversation around nature-based climate solutions. I was reflecting the other day that I can remember going to the UN climate change negotiations when I was with Climate Action Network more than 10, 12 years ago with Chris Henschel, among others. Are you here, Chris? Yeah, there you are. So Chris, who at the time was with the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Association, and I always felt a little bit sorry for him because he spent so much time wandering the halls of UN climate negotiations trying to convince people that LULUCF was really important and we needed to pay more attention to it. And for those of you who don't speak UNese, LULUCF is land use change and forestry. And at the time, he was constantly trying to convince the other members of Climate Action Network to get their head around the critical role that it played. And so I know that there are people in this room who have been working on land use issues for a very long time. I also know that there are organizations like Nature United that have been doing global research for years on nature-based climate solutions, that there are already international coalitions led by groups like WWF Canada and Conservation Wildlife Society. And I know that there are groups and people in this room that have been working on natural infrastructure, protected areas, offsets, and restoration for decades. But I also think that we've never been quite here before when it comes to nature-based climate solutions in Canada. This summit is happening against the backdrop of a world that is negotiating the next phase of the Convention on Biological Diversity and is preparing to enter what the United Nations has declared as the Decade of Restoration. It's a world that is waking up like never before to the urgent need to address the twin environmental crises of climate change and species collapse. And here in Canada, we have a federal government that has made a commitment to achieve meaningful greenhouse gas emission reductions through nature-based solutions to climate change. We have a government that has promised to plant billions of trees and create new funding streams for natural climate solutions. We have a government that just recently set a goal of protecting 25% of Canada's land and fresh water by 2025, moving on to 30% by 2030. And to give you an indication of the scale of that commitment, going from where we are today to 30% represents extending protection to an area of land slightly smaller than Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan combined. So these, oh, okay, we got a lot of work to do. So these are the kinds of big ideas that we need in a world where 1 million species are gravitating towards extinction and where we are racing against the clock to avoid runaway climate change. So for today, we have about 400 of Canada's most engaged people around these issues assembled to have a conversation about how we can work together to turn big ideas into concrete action. Over the next 2 days, we're going to hear from municipalities that are leading the way, provinces that are designing bold new programs, businesses that are working to be part of the solution, Indigenous leaders that are redefining conservation and climate action, government officials that are working to turn ambitious mandates into meaningful results, and nature and conservation organizations that are on the ground every day doing what they can to solve some of the most urgent problems of our time. So on behalf of the steering committee, I want to thank you all for taking the time to be part of the summit, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it takes us. So before we begin, a few logistics. We do have simultaneous translation, as I mentioned. You can find a lot of shared resources on our website. We have a resource page where we're trying to store information, so please share anything you want us to be added there. We'll be organizing webinars after the summit. The summit is being live streamed. You can find the link to the live stream on the front page of the summit's website, naturebasedclimatesolutions.ca. And there is a documentary film crew here that is documenting the participation of some of Canada's leading youth environmental activists as they navigate the halls of the summit and do other great work. Speaker bios are also on the website, in case you're wondering. We chose for paper not to include them in the program itself. And finally, let's try to have a conversation over the next couple days using hashtag #NatureNow. Hashtag #NatureNow. This is an opportunity for you to provide live feedback, share inspiring statements, and connect with others that are here today.